name is Dexter Bishop, and I'm president of the General Lander CWRT, a Civil War roundtable. We meet here in this building, the General Lander Museum and Hall. We're in the main hall at the present time, and I'm sure that you'll see pictures of various veterans before the night is over. Now, if I'm going to see anything, I'm going to put these on. I just want to share a few words this evening about a man who was relegated to the fine print of history. His actions in the West and during the Civil War were overwhelmed by the great events of Gettysburg and Vicksburg. General William Lander was born December 17, 1821. His birth certificate shows his name is Frederick William Lander. His mother is Eliza West. His father was Edward Lander, and grandmother Elizabeth Derby West. Very well-known families in Salem. General Lander's family can be traced back to the founding of Salem. In the early 1800s, Salem was the sixth largest city in America, a wealthy seafaring town. By tracing back to the Derby and West families, we find they were among the wealthiest citizens of Salem. Both families were active in the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and shipping around the world. Lander, as a youth, grew up in Salem. He attended the best schools of the day, such as Franklin and Phillips Academy, Andover, Dumner Academy in Byfield. His studies included engineering, and he was taught by that subject by a major botanist, South Andover. His other studies included trigonometry, surveying, and civil engineering, which led to a job at age 17. He surveyed for the Eastern Railway and then for the Maine Railroad for 3 years. Lander, late in 1841, without telling his family, enrolled in Norwich University up in Vermont. In 1842, he left Norwich without graduating to return to Salem to work for his brother, Charles, who started an ice company at Wenham Lake. Isn't that a beautiful looking picture of Wenham Lake? That's what it looks like today. Now, the Wenham Lake, by the way, is in the town of Wenham. Well, everybody here would know that. He built a railroad spur from the Eastern Railroad to Wenham, and he built a number of outbuildings, all involved in the production of ice. He moved an old church building to the lake to provide storage facility for the ice. The ice from the lake was shipped around the world, most notably London, England. Who would have ever thought that we would get ice out of Wenham Lake, which now serves as a water supply for Wenham, and then ship the ice all the way to England. In 1850, Lander was drawn to the call to build a transcontinental railway. And for the next 10 years, Lander explored, surveyed, built bridges across rivers, and met with important people, those who would fund the building of a transcontinental railway. His exploits were many, and his reputation grew. Lander built a section of road that cut 200 miles off the Oregon Trail. And you see this picture on the screen now. And that is what it looks like today. As you can see, it's just a dirt road, and it shaved 200 miles off the way to go to Oregon. The Lander Road added to his reputation. And today you can find the namesakes: Lander Creek, Lander Peak, Lander County, Nevada, and Lander, Wyoming. A few years back, the curator of the Lander Museum out in Wyoming came up to see what we had. And his hope was to be something to take back that was Lander's to his museum. And of course, we couldn't do that. So he went back unhappy, but there's still the other part of their trip here was to find and see where he's buried. And I can say to you that when they were here, there was absolutely nothing in Salem that said Brigadier General Frederick W. Lander that you could find. Now, some of us knew that he was buried in the family plot in the Broad Street Cemetery, and he had no marks at all, other than the simple word on the plot west. And last year, it was decided by the Veterans Agent in Salem to put a plaque up, and we participated in that. Something that really is completely off the mark when it comes to General Lander, and that was he wrote poetry. He even got it published. I'll give you a quick example of that. It was published, was known for his lectures about his experiences in the West. Once on, and this is one of his poems. Once on New England's bloody heights and over a southern plain, our fathers fought for sovereign rights that would mean might reign, and by that only Lord we serve, the great Jehovah's name. By those sweet lips that ever nerve, high hearts to deeds of faith. F.W. Lander. I'm not sure that he's a super poet, but he was well known. And one of the things that he was known for, at the beginning of the Civil War, he was well known across the nation as Old Grizzly, a reputation he earned when he killed a 1,200-pound bear as he sat on his horse and in close range with 12 shots from his pistol while he was exploring the mountains of Colorado. General Winfield Scott called Lander the great natural American soldier, which he was. In 1860, Lander married Jean Davenport in October of 1860 in San Francisco. They then, as a couple, got sticks and moved to Washington, D.C. And in Washington, that is where his military career starts. Now, this is another picture of her. She was a well-known stage actress, not only in this country, but in Europe. She retired from the stage to be with her husband when they got married, which today that would never happen. In that time and place, that was the expected thing to do. When the general passed, Jean and her mother took charge of a hospital department in Port Royal. This was during the war now. It's interesting that also we must remember is she had a home right here in Lynn, right up off of Ocean Street, and she died here. When the war began in 1861, Lander volunteered and served as an aide on the staff of General George McClellan. In May of 1881, Lander was commissioned a brigadier general and distinguished himself in the Army of the Potomac campaign in Western Virginia. It was during the series of small battles he was wounded. While he held Edwards Ferry with a company of sharpshooters, he was shot in the leg. He went back into service at Hancock before the wound healed. In January of 1862, he repelled a greatly superior Confederate force that besieged the town. On February 14, 1862, he made a brilliant dash on an enemy at Huingare, which prompted a letter from Secretary of War at the request of President Lincoln. On March 2, 1862, General drew his last breath and died of congestion of the brain. Today's we know it best as he had water on the brain. He was in a lot of pain near the end, and it was very, very hard to survive. In fact, as far as I have been able to find out, if you had what he had, there was nobody beat it. It's just like when you got shot in the war. If it was a body shot, they usually left you on the field for 2 or 3 days. If you're still alive, then they'd bring you in and try to patch you up. If it was a shoulder or an arm, any of your extremities, they would take you right in and cut it off and send you home and say, you're going to survive. And a lot of them did, but a lot didn't need it. There was a time in which everybody thought, or didn't even know, but it was floated that he was the only Union general to cause Stonewall Jackson to back up. Very interesting situation. And basically what he did is he got on his horse and charged at the troops, Confederates. And I think a lot of it had to do with they were so surprised to see this general out by himself. His troops probably 15, 20 minutes behind him. And so he's there by himself for quite a period of time. He survived that. He did get a shot in his leg, and it did not heal. And as we know, when he died, he had, and this is where I've run across this part several times, and that is the day he died, his plan to attack Stonewall Jackson went into effect. And that plan resulted in his earning a reputation of getting Stonewall Jackson to back up. Unfortunately, it was early in the war and not much was said about it. But General McClellan announced his death March 3rd, 1862. His funeral in Washington, D.C. was attended by President Lincoln. High-ranking military men led by General McClellan, and McClellan actually led Lander's horse in this march down Pennsylvania Avenue. He had a service in Washington. There was a parade route down to the train station in Washington from where the church was. 20,000 people lined the route, mainly because of all people to be in that parade was Lincoln. He and McClellan leading the horse with the typical boots upside down and stirrups. Everybody dressed in black. From that parade, he went to, he was shipped to Salem. He passed through Lynn to get to Salem, but did not stop and have anything huge, because everybody that was anybody, either military or civilian, all went to Salem. There's a copy of his service, which was quite long. On his coffin, all it said was, died March 2, 1882, at Camp Chase, Virginia, age of 39, bravest of the brave. And he was not of course, the size gave him a tremendous way to impress people to do what he wanted. He was very big and he could enforce any of his commands. And the fact that Lincoln had the Secretary of War write this letter basically said, we thank you for doing what a lot of my generals can't do or won't do. And that is, he went forward, he charged. Whereas at that time, it was very hard to get the armies to move on the Union side. The interesting thing, this I have to give Wendy credit for finding this. This particular is a wooden carving that was used in printing this picture in the newspaper. What you see here is one of his subordinate officers catch him reading a family Bible. At the time, his troops didn't want to go forward. There was no desire. And so what he did was, he said, I'm going to open the Bible to whatever page that opens to. And if it says that we should go forward, then we will. If it says we shouldn't, then we won't. He opened the Bible, and in the first verse he saw said, go forward. And so he did. Not much of a person to preach from the Bible or to tell anybody at all that he was a man of God, but he certainly did use the scriptures to guide him in his life's activity. In this slide, what we see is the small booklet that they used up here. We heard the fact that when he was shipped from West Virginia to Washington, a group of men in green, they accompanied the coffin, the sharpshooters. By the way, if you didn't know what the men in green is, they were sharpshooters. They went with the casket all the way to Salem on a promise to his wife that they would make sure that he was properly taken care of the whole trip. This is Memorial Day, which back then was called Decoration Day, 1868. Mourners decorating the graves of General Frederick W. Lander in Salem, the first nationwide observance of Memorial/Decoration Day, May 30, which is the appropriate day there. A few years back, maybe 25 or 30 now, the Congress moved the day of Memorial Day to the first Monday before that date, and so to make a longer holiday. And this is the GAR plot in Pine Grove Cemetery, and there you see all of the men. And this again was another one of those wooden carved, instead of a picture like they would do today, they had to carve in wood the picture, and then they could use it to print. If you haven't been up to Pine Grove Cemetery, this particular monument is a little different than the one that's there now. And in about 1890, they took this one down and put the present one up that we see today. But as you can see, they decorated it with greenery wrapped around it. And you can also see in this, the flag holders that are up there now. And you can also see there was a heck of a lot of guys here. There's over 700 buried up there. Where sleeps the blue? Graves of veterans of all wars decorated on Memorial Day. And this scene that is from Pine Grove Cemetery. Now, while this is all going on, his wife, because she is moved in relationship to the times, and it was at the beginning of the war, because he was dead and buried when all the big battles took place. And that's one of the reasons he was not, could have been a huge, like McClellan or any of those big generals. He could have been in that category. But generals that really knew what they were doing and were not afraid to lead. And that's what it was. He was not afraid to lead, and he led. But he got shot and died too soon. Otherwise, he would be right up there with Grant, Meade, all of those generals.